How do you take the good technique you've learned on your practice pad and apply that around the drum set? Well, today we're breaking down how to do this in 3 steps. Hey, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. I believe that no matter who you are, you can conquer the drums when you're armed with the right know-how. I believe this video is going to help you do just that. While you're here, be sure to check out my totally free e-guide, your 3 biggest hi-hat problems solved. It's going to work your left foot coordination, it's going to work your hand technique, all sorts of good stuff. It's in the description below. Let's get going. A big question that we really can't ignore today is, should your grip stay the same even as you're striking the different surfaces of your drum set? Well, the answer to this is yes and no, and we're going to really dig into this answer a little more later in the video. I think it's totally going to make sense when I explain it to you and show you exactly what I'm talking about. I believe these 3 steps we're going to cover today are really going to help you get more comfortable around the kit, but we're not going to leave it at applying hand technique around the kit. We're also going to talk about how can we take good hand technique, the principles of good hand technique, and apply that to our right foot on the kick. How can we employ the principles of looseness and rebound to our right foot and our kick pedal? This is going to be interesting, and I'm excited to share it with you. Now, an important prerequisite here, because we're talking about taking good technique and applying it to the kit, we're assuming that you've got the loose grip going on your practice pad, on your snare, where you're gripping loosely with your thumb and maybe your first 2 fingers, either of those first 2 fingers, and the stick is resting there. And you've got all this great rebound and you're keeping your hand loose, extending your fingers to let the stick bounce. If that's something you're still working on or that you're struggling with, check out my hand technique playlist on the channel. There's a whole bunch of lessons going into detail about that, so you can really work to fine tune that grip. But in the meantime, let's get going with today's lesson. Number 1, this kind of seems like a no-brainer, but a lot of times the no-brainers are the best things to do, and that is practice the same things that you practice on your pad around the kit. But I don't just mean going gung, 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 which you can definitely do, and that'll definitely be beneficial. But also put one hand on one surface, the other hand on another surface. So maybe right hand on the surface of your ride, left hand on the snare, or right hand on the floor tom, left hand on the hi-hat. Weird things like that. That way you can also start to train your ear to be okay with hearing that weird back and forth, because a lot of times your ear will trick you into playing out of time. Where if you're playing singles with 2 totally different sounds, it's very easy for them to become gallopy, where instead of being steady and consistent, they just get weird because the sounds are so different. So that can be a really beneficial thing to practice, and of course it totally splits your brain in 2, because you're having to think about, all right, I'm hitting this surface that feels one way, this surface that feels another way. And that can really help with preparing you for just hitting anything random on the kit and developing that muscle memory to respond accordingly. And I think muscle memory is kind of the name of the game here, where if maybe you've come from a background of playing on your pad a whole bunch or playing on an E-kit a whole bunch, and now you've gotten an acoustic kit and you're getting used to the feel, spend some time getting acclimated and just sitting there and playing singles on your tom, singles on your floor tom, whatever you've got to do to develop that muscle memory, because that's what needs to happen. Once you get totally comfortable knowing what to expect from your floor tom, then you can play whatever you want to play on your floor tom. Likewise, once you know what to expect with your hats based on how you hit them, you'll be able to play much better. And there will be nothing unexpected. You'll always know what's happening, and you'll be much more in command of your kit that way. So just spend some time doing the boring stuff, playing the singles, whatever, just hitting things and getting used to how they feel. So that first tip was very much a beginner, very simple, basic tip. And you might be like, Steven, I'm past that. I know how things on my kit feel. I feel like I've got good facility around the kit in terms of muscle memory, knowing what to expect. But maybe you struggle with navigation and actually thinking through, okay, I've got good hand technique, but why is it that I get so stiff? Why do I feel so clumsy when I'm moving around the kit? And so you definitely need to keep these next 2 points in mind and start to employ these in your practicing. Number 2 is strike every surface, any surface on your drum set, with the intention of where you're going next. So that means if you're going tom, tom, crash, then you're hitting that first tom with the intention of going directly to the next tom, and then from that tom to the crash. And so you're moving in arc motions. The shortest distance between 2 points on your drum set is an arc. And so always be thinking of moving in arcs, always moving with that intention of where you're going next. You could also think of this as pulling the sound out of everything you hit. That was kind of a principle that we would employ when I was in music school and we were playing percussion and playing marimba. You would strike each bar of the marimba with the intention of pulling the sound out. And there actually was some actual purpose for that, and it was because if you let your yarn mallet bury into the bar, well, it would choke it out. Same if you were to choke your stick into the head of a drum. But specifically with marimba, you would want to snap that mallet right out of there to make sure it had minimal contact time with the bar so that you had maximum resonance. And so there was some truth to that, pulling the sound out. And so that same principle applies to drum set, where we want to quickly get going to the next thing. So you don't have to exaggerate it. You don't have to literally just snap the sticks up off the drums, but you want to think that way, moving lightly from drum to drum. And that alone, that mindset alone, is going to improve your navigation. This third point really gets into answering that question from earlier in the video of, does your grip need to change depending on which surface you're striking? So our answer was yes and no. No, because the fundamental core values, principles of your grip need to not change. You need to always have loose hands, get good rebounds. So that's the given. But yes, it can change because, point number 3, twist your wrists so that your grip changes according to where you are on the kit. In other words, as you move to the right side of the kit with your right hand, let your wrist twist to be more of a thumbs on top grip. And likewise, if you move to the left side of the kit, you could go more palms down. With your left hand, same thing might apply, where if you reach over to the floor tom with your left hand, that could be more palms down. Or if you were to reach over real quick to the hi-hat with your left hand, you could just flick your wrist over, which would mean thumbs on top. This technique allows for rapid maneuvering around the kit, whether it's from tom to tom with your left hand, or if you pull out your right hand and go snare tom, you can quickly just flick it back and forth, which makes it so much more easy to play quickly because you're minimizing the motion. You're not having to move so much, and you're not having to rely on an entire arm to move. Basically, the less movement you can have with your body, the more rapid, smooth movement you can have with your sticks. Honestly, this is the key to smooth navigation around the kit. And if you've been stuck there where you feel like things are smooth and looking good on your pad, but not when you're playing around the kit, this is probably it. This is probably the issue. So spend some time working this, making sure, watching your hands, making sure that things are still just as loose and open and rebounding as they were on the pad or on the snare, but be very intentional about moving your wrist and trying to minimize arm motion so that you can get a lot of stick motion with very little arm motion, because that's gonna save you energy and it's gonna make it way easier to play fast and play in time. If you've watched a lot of my videos, you've heard me say before, it's not what you practice, it's how you practice it. And so I want to emphasize that you can practice the principles and the techniques and things we're talking about in this lesson via anything. You could sit there on your kit and play your favorite groove, play a couple of fills, play a song. Doesn't matter what, it's the how. So be intentional about working on this. And even if you're on a gig, you're playing with a band, you're jamming, you're rehearsing, have these things in the back of your head or maybe in the front of your head, thinking about employing them, and that's how you're going to get way better at this much more quickly. All right, we're going to get to the kick drum thing in just a minute. First, there's two common questions that show up specifically regarding how should you grip doing this. The first one is, should you play the hi-hat with your right hand thumbs up or palms down? So should you go French or German on the hi-hat? I've seen drummers do it either way. I personally prefer to go palms down, but I know a drummer who's a fantastic player who is pretty consistently thumbs up, and that works great for him. So honestly, it doesn't matter. If we're employing the wrist twist motion, well, it makes sense to be thumbs up on the ride, palms down on the hi-hat. So that's kind of my thinking. I can go back and forth more easily between hi-hat and snare, or between a tom and a hi-hat if I'm keeping it palms down on the hi-hat. But honestly, it comes down to whatever is most comfortable for you. Another big question though is, which side of the ride bell should you strike, because that's going to affect how you're gripping your stick. If you're playing the outside, the right side of the bell, you can stay thumbs on top, French style. But if you're going to hit the inside of the bell, the left side, well then you've got to twist around, you've got to go more German, which means your elbow's got to stick out, and that means if you're going back and forth between there and your floor tom, things can get a little bit weird, versus if you're keeping it French, that motion is simpler. The motion's a little bit more concise, a little bit easier that way. So that's my thinking there, but it all depends on what feels most comfortable to you, and honestly what sound you want, because there actually is a sound difference. If you're hitting the ride or even the bell with the tip of the stick, so you're just gently pinging, there's a sound difference between gripping it French and gripping it German. Check this out. And if you couldn't notice it there in my example, try it out for yourself. Hold your stick real loose, French style, hit your ride, and then flip over to German, hit it. You're gonna notice a difference in sound. And so if you wanna be really picky about that, you can let that affect your decision too. Okay, the big bonus tip for right foot on kick drum. This is really cool because we don't really think about applying hand technique to the right foot. But a lot of the same principles we employ with getting loose grip and rebound and all of that good stuff very much applies to the right foot too. Every pedal has a natural tempo. What I mean by this is if you take your bass drum pedal, like put your hand on the beater, pull it back, let it go, it's gonna wobble, and it's gonna wobble at a certain pace depending on your pedal. If you've got a heavier pedal, it might wobble more slowly. A lighter pedal or a lighter beater, shorter beater, it's gonna wobble more quickly. And as long as your pedal is in good shape and well oiled, it's gonna do that, and it's gonna keep going for a few seconds. The parallel here is that if we're playing with a drumstick on a snare, we can let the stick kind of naturally get going, where it's bouncing, we're throwing it back down, it's bouncing back up, and we don't have to think too much about tempo. I mean, yeah, we do. We've got to make sure we're playing in time, but because it's such a natural, loose motion and the stick is just doing its thing, we've got gravity, rebound, a little bit of work from your hand, things happen very fluidly and naturally, and those notes happen very smoothly and in time. They're not going to be choppy and clumsy because you're loose and there's rebound. And so when you let the laws of physics take over with something, time becomes better, smoothness increases because you're getting out of your own way. That's important, and we want to do that with the kick drum. So keeping all that in mind, what you can do is put your foot back on your pedal and start playing the pedal lightly, making the beater go back and forth, but not so much that it hits the head. So figure out that comfortable tempo where you can just sit there, keeping your foot on the foot plate, whether you're heel up or heel down. The point is you got to keep a toe on there, so always have a toe in contact with the foot plate. And just get the beater swinging back and forth. What this means is that we can actually have a whole bunch of beater motion going on and we're not even making a sound. Or we can increase that beater motion just a little bit, put a little bit more energy into it, and now it's gently tapping the head every time it swings toward it. And as we continue to increase that energy and put a little bit more foot force into it, then we get louder. But the interesting thing is we can get louder and softer without actually increasing or decreasing the amount of beater throw. The beater's still moving just as much. Also, a prerequisite to this is make sure you've got a lot of beater angle. Make sure your beater's, leaning back pretty heavily and not like right up here. You want to make sure you've got a lot of distance between beater and kick drum head while it's in resting position. This technique allows you to play steadily with the laws of physics helping you out and that natural motion and tempo taking place so that you're not having to be entirely in control of the notes that are happening. So from here you can practice playing a little more slowly, playing a little more quickly, playing loudly, playing softly, but trying to have a lot of beater motion the whole time. And yes, this means you have to bounce your beater. You do have to bounce the beater to really pull this technique off. But I think this is most important when you're playing quietly, because if you choke the beater up on the head so that there's not much beater motion when you're playing quietly, there's just too much room for error where it's so easy to be clumsy and it's so easy to rush and play things out of time. But as soon as you give yourself some motion and some space there, things get much more steady and solid. That same thing is true with your hands, where when you've got natural smooth rebound, your time gets better and your feel gets better because things are less choppy and rushed and clumsy. Same thing applies to that right foot. Give yourself beater space, beater bounce, even when playing softly, and that's going to help things be more steady. And then when you're playing loudly, just have a ton of beater motion, lots of beater motion. If you want to bury the beater, you can, but I suggest bouncing it because things are going to be more steady and you're establishing a motion by doing that. All right, that's it for today. Thanks everyone for watching. If this video helped you out, download my free e-guide that takes you more in depth with hi-hat technique and even some left foot technique, employing some of the same things we talked about in today's lesson. It's called Your Biggest Hi-Hat Problems Solved. 9 strategies for overcoming hi-hat frustration and left foot issues. If you want to go in depth with improving your hi-hat game and improving your coordination, check out that guide. It's totally free. Be sure to subscribe if you're new and check out some of the additional lessons in the description below. I'll see you on the next video.